Now today what I want to share with you I feel could be an unpopular opinion, but first, let's roll the footage. All that footage from that sequence was shot on either the DJI AIR2S or the DJI MINI 2. Could you see the difference? Let me know, seriously, could you tell the difference between the AIR2S and the MINI 2? What was your guess? I'm gonna roll that sequence again in a little bit so you can see exactly what every single clip was shot on. But first, let's talk a little bit about both of the drones. Now, just a quick history on my drone flying experience. I started on the DJI Mavic Air, graduated to the DJI AIR2S, and I bought the DJI MINI 2 because I wanted something smaller, more nimble, and also if I was out to fly it, I wasn't so afraid to lose it as I would be if I lost my more high-dollar drone, the DJI AIR2S. And as I use them today, I'll basically grab the DJI MINI 2 if I want to go out and do something quick, vlog style, or I just need an area that's small and tight to fly it in, or something that's less cumbersome and loud. Or if I want something that's a little more cinematic, I'll grab the DJI AIR2S. Now, what surprised me though, as I've shot more and more with both of them, occasionally I'll pull some clips in from the MINI 2 and I'm like, this looks so good. So specifically for YouTube, let's talk about YouTube because that's mainly where I publish, and I think mainly where a lot of us are either watching and or publishing. For YouTube, the DJI MINI 2 is pretty comparable to the AIR2S. So comparable, in fact, that I think if you're ready to get started, you should just start with the smaller drone and maybe graduate to the bigger drone later. Now, some of you pixel peepers, cinematographer types are gonna be like, well, yeah, you can get more out of the AIR2S. Yes, I get it, I know that. But what I'm saying is, from a glance at YouTube, if you're just publishing a video, it's very difficult for most to tell the difference between the MINI 2 and the AIR2S. And let's talk a little bit about like pros and cons of each of them. Now, the DJI MINI 2 has a couple distinct advantages in my opinion. The first and most obvious is the cost. It's under half the cost of what it starts to get started with the DJI AIR2S. So if you're looking to lower the barrier to entry, just start on the DJI MINI 2. Right now, as this is today, it's under $500. If you buy the Fly More combo, I think it's another $100. And I would recommend the Fly More combo if you can fit it into your budget, but if you can't, just get started and get picky later. The second, and this is pretty damn important, and I know some people talk about it, but I don't think we've talked about it as much as we should, is that the DJI MINI 2 comes in under that 250 grain sweet spot for regulation and stuff like that. And just to summarize that, like basically there's a lot less regulation because it comes in under the threshold for where regulation starts for flying a drone. So if you're worried about headaches and regulation and stuff like that, again, the DJI MINI 2 makes a lot of sense just to use it and worry less. Now the third, and this is perhaps a pro and a con, and for some of you that are beginner drone flyers, this may not be as much for you, but I appreciate the DJI MINI 2 not having obstacle avoidance. And my reason for that is I like flying it through smaller spaces, tighter gaps, and things like that without having to turn off the obstacle avoidance. And the other thing is that if I'm flying it through a smaller space or something that's a little more risky, it's a less expensive drone, so I'm not as worried about crashing it. No, I don't want to crash it, but also if something were to happen, it's less expensive than the DJI AIR2S. What I would say to that though is that's more of the perspective of somebody who's been flying a drone for a while. If you're brand new to flying a drone, just be safe. Keep in mind that everyone who's flown a drone has crashed a drone. Start simple, get used to the controls, be safe first. You maybe get a little fancy after that. For the DJI AIR2S, the main reason that I tend to grab that versus the MINI 2 when I'm going out into the field is if I want something that's just more cinematic. It allows me the flexibility to shoot in D-Log and have 10-bit color, which basically means I can just push the colors around more when I'm color grading it. And that's a nice thing if you're trying to create something that's more polished or for a higher end type feeling production. Now, although that's the main reason I'll grab the Air2S when I go out into the field, there are a couple other things that it really shines with, and the other is like flying in the wind. Because the Mini 2 is smaller, less powerful, if you're flying in something that's really heavy, really harsh, or also very cold, it tends to run out of battery a little faster, and it just doesn't have the horsepower to push through the wind. And the Air2S I've flown in some pretty nasty conditions and been able to get quality clips, and I actually haven't found conditions I couldn't fly the Air2S on. Now the Mini 2 on the other hand, I would say fly it in most of your standard conditions. Don't fly it in anything extreme. More recently I was flying it in Michigan on a really cold day with a little bit of wind. It was out over a cliff and I barely got it back because it was chugging into the wind. It was running out of battery, and nobody wants to lose a drone, so don't lose a drone. Be a little safer, more cautious if you're starting with the Mini 2, but in most regular conditions it's good to go. Now let's run that sequence back so you can see what everything was shot on. Now, I wanted to make this video today not to necessarily say which drone you should be using or which drone you should shoot on, but to give you an example of what the different footage looks like and help you make a more educated decision if you're thinking about getting into the drone game or maybe changing drones to the Mini 2 or the Air2S, especially as it relates to YouTube and YouTube footage and what the footage quality looks like as it comes through on YouTube. For all these reasons, I don't think you should hesitate to get started with the Mini 2, especially if you're trying to save some money. Upgrade later, get fancy later, invest in the things that are going to help you tell better stories. Because at the end of the day, it's just cool that you're out there making stuff, doing things, and use whatever tools best help support you with your budget and wherever you're at this time. I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more, and leave the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed this style of video. 2022 is going to be a great year, friends. Get out there, make some stuff, get outdoors, make some memories, and I will catch you back here for the next one. Oh guys, one last tip: if your footage isn't looking how you want it to look, stop shooting 30 frames per second. Shoot 24 frames.